Divorce papers had been duly filed, and when it came to dividing the property, I made the decision to claim the house. Despite my insistence, Ben dismissed any notion that he could contest it, uttering those final words. He abruptly left the hospital room, indifferent to my pleas for him to wait, and my desire for a meaningful conversation. That was how I found myself discarded, even in the midst of battling a serious illness like cancer. Loneliness enveloped me, but strangely, the negative emotions that once lingered in my heart began to dissipate. It was as if my love for Ben had evaporated. At that moment, I acknowledged that Ben, who had insulted me and consistently acted selfishly, deserved some form of retribution. I began calmly strategizing my revenge. My name is Wendy Morgan, a 50-year-old housewife living with my husband Ben. Our marriage, devoid of children, had spanned 30 years. Initially, I believed we were a supportive couple, but an irreparable rift had developed between us. In my understanding of marriage, partners should support, challenge, and complement each other. However, this was absent in our relationship. Returning from an errand, I found Ben demanding dinner immediately, oblivious to the continuous responsibilities of a housewife. Even on his days off, he prioritized his own leisure over supporting me. Over the years, Ben never extended a helping hand, regardless of how busy or unwell I was. His perception of a housewife's role seemed limited to constant labor, and he never allowed me to rest, even during illness. I had hoped for a marriage built on mutual support, but Ben's actions contradicted that ideal. The early days saw me attempting to bridge the gap, but Ben remained resolute, asserting his belief that, as a housewife, I had no grounds to complain. Love had long faded, and I didn't anticipate unwavering support in everything. Still, I longed for simple kindness during challenging days. Ben's refusal to acknowledge my humanity and hardships widened the rift between us, turning our marriage joyless and meaningless. I grasped the situation more acutely than anyone else. It was during this realization that I sensed something was wrong with my health. While I had always been prone to illness, this time felt distinctly different. I promptly reached out to my father, who escorted me to the hospital, where I received the diagnosis of cancer. Fortunately, it was detected early, and the doctor assured me that I could commence treatment immediately. Eager to begin the healing process, I implored my father to bring only the essentials from home. Hastily, I navigated through the hospital admission procedures, unable to meet Ben that day due to his work commitments. I conveyed the disquieting news to him through a brief message. Cancer has been found, and I'm being hospitalized for treatment immediately. In these moments of anxiety about the uncertain future, Ben's image crept into my thoughts. Despite my belief that my love for him had waned, a latent desire to face him properly and continue our life together as a couple lingered deep within my heart. Even though Ben had consistently been aloof and indifferent, I envisioned the scenario where, now that I was weakened, he might express concern and ask, "Are you okay?" I yearned for some warm words and would have been content with just one visit. I wondered if he struggled with meals and household chores in my absence. I felt remorse for not being able to fulfill the household duties I had always taken for granted. However, as days passed in the hospital, Ben never visited. He had read my message, and yet there was no expression of concern, not even a simple reply acknowledging the situation. His apparent indifference, despite my serious illness, shook me to the core, causing profound pain. Realizing the futility of my expectations, I decided to stop. Anticipating anything from Ben with this newfound mindset, I faced the grueling battle against the illness. The treatment was as demanding as expected, marked by enduring pain and suffering. The medication's side effects took a toll on my body, leading to many sleepless nights filled with discomfort. There were moments when I contemplated giving up on treatment, allowing my deteriorating body to take its course and end my life. However, each time I felt this way, the encouraging words from my parents, reassuring me that I was doing great and things would surely get better, compelled me to summon strength and endure until today. Then on a day when I was particularly unwell, lying in bed and staring blankly at the ceiling, the door to my room unexpectedly swung open. It wasn't the day for my parents to visit, and I couldn't help but wonder who had entered. The identity of the visitor became clear as I shifted my gaze and saw Ben standing there. Had he finally come to visit me, genuinely concerned about my condition? As he looked at my emaciated face with hollow cheeks, a whirlwind of emotions left me speechless. Would he come to dislike me even more? Without displaying any concern for my state, Ben sat on a chair next to the bed, stared at me and laughed. "So this is how bad one can look with cancer, huh? You don't even look like a woman anymore," he said. His words made me feel as if the blood had drained from my face. These were words that should never be said to someone fighting cancer. I didn't want him to say anything more, but unaware of my feelings, Ben continued with even more hurtful words. "Ever since you've been hospitalized and not at home, every day has been like heaven. The house is a mess, but I don't even have to go back there. Life is so comfortable without you." His heartless words reopened my wounds. Why must I be subjected to such cruel words? Why is there not a single word of concern from him? Although I wanted to vehemently criticize Ben, my weakened body couldn't move as I wished, and all I could do was silently accept his brutal words. I looked at Ben with a vacant gaze, and noticing my stare, he laughed condescendingly. Then suddenly he said, "Oh yeah, by the way, I've already filed the divorce papers. I'll be taking the house. Ask for the property division. You hardly have any right to refuse." The moment I heard those words, my vision blurred and twisted. Did he file the divorce papers without even consulting me? Why? I was at a loss for words. Then he continued to speak. "I've really fallen for someone. She's 20 years younger, but I'm serious about her. I plan to be with her, so you're in the way." The realization that he was having an affair crossed my mind. However, after saying what he wanted, he began preparing to leave. "Wait a minute," I said, but then he paid no attention. There was clearly no love left for me in his heart. The realization was so painful that it didn't matter anymore. "I see, I understood." I said this and then left the hospital room with a pleased laugh. After that, I endured my treatment with even more determination than before. Despite the hardships, I focused my will, resolved to completely cure my cancer and regain my health. 2 days passed like this. It might sound short, but for me, unable to sleep properly at night, those 2 days felt very long. I wondered if the divorce Ben mentioned really happened, or if he had said it just to unnerve me. The uncertainty was unbearable, but somehow I managed to continue my treatment. In fact, I had a trump card to completely bring down Ben. Even Ben, who seemed almost inhuman, would be thrown into chaos once he realized it. If he panicked, he would surely try to contact me in some way. While waiting with this thought, Ben's call came in. Thinking it improper to answer in the hospital room, I pretended not to notice. But Ben persistently kept calling, even on silent mode. The continuous calls were too annoying. I'm in the hospital room, and it's inconvenient to have my phone ringing, so please don't call. I sent this message. The calls finally stopped, but then came texts like, "Please let me talk to you just once. Please, I was wrong about everything. I'll apologize properly." Apparently, he had resorted to messaging since I wasn't answering his calls. All his words seemed like self-defense. Probably, Ben realized why I accepted the divorce so easily. Can I come over there now? Facing my silence, Ben seemed to have reached his limit and sent that message. Honestly, facing Ben now, amidst my grueling battle with illness, felt like nothing but pain. But if I refused, he would probably keep calling. So I replied, "Do as you like." My revenge was about to begin. Ben, who had unjustly treated me for so long and divorced me without consent, deserved a severe punishment that would make him despise his life. I had been eagerly anticipating the moment when I could bring him down to the depths of despair. "Hey, what the hell is this all about?" Ben entered the room with a shout, his tone suggesting a palpable sense of panic. To an outsider, it might seem like he was overreacting, but given the circumstances, it was natural for Ben to be agitated. After all, I had been concealing an incredibly important secret, and the critical moment had arrived. "I had no idea that you had assets worth $10 million. Why didn't you tell me how much you had?" He spoke, placing my passbook on the desk, clearly displaying a deposit of over $10 million. "I never mentioned it because you never asked," I replied. "How could I imagine a housewife like you having so much money? If I knew you had this much, I wouldn't have divorced you." "That's not my problem. It's Ben's fault for divorcing me without proper confirmation." Despite his domineering behavior and divorcing me without my consent, Ben couldn't stop his selfish remarks upon discovering my assets. "Why didn't you tell me? I wouldn't have divorced you if I knew." I decided to reveal the truth to the selfish bee. The truth is, I accumulated this fortune of over $10 million through investments I started in my spare time. It was my parents who suggested, "Why don't you try investing?" Our family life was comfortable even on Ben's salary alone, but I wanted to contribute to our finances in some way. My father, knowledgeable about investments, immediately taught me diligently when I expressed interest. Thanks to his guidance, I started with the hope of making even a small profit and continued investing steadily. I made my first investment 5 years ago, and since then I rapidly improved, becoming capable of earning significant amounts of money through investments. Even my father was astonished, saying, "I never expected you to grow this much." The profits I generated over these 5 years are the $10 million recorded in the passbook Ben brought. Actually, I was planning to tell you when the timing was right, but then I got cancer. You divorced me without listening to anything I had to say. I never intended to keep this wealth a secret forever. Once I overcame my battle with cancer and could return to my normal life, I planned to tell Ben about this $10 million. I had originally intended to share it with him, envisioning that we could continue our life as a couple and use it when necessary. However, Ben selfishly chose to divorce before I could reveal this financial secret. Now that we're strangers, it feels odd to disclose it to him, given this outcome. The entire $10 million probably belongs to me. As I recounted my story, Ben's face flushed, and he began shouting, "If I knew you had this much money, I wouldn't have divorced you. It's your fault for keeping it a secret, so pay me $10 million in the property division. You need to atone for the sin of keeping secrets from your husband." Whether he was panicking over the reality of such a vast fortune or was frustrated that he couldn't get his hands on it, Ben started saying the unthinkable. Since we were already divorced, no matter what, it was impossible to give him this $10 million. Still, Ben seemed unable to reach the $10 million right before him and started making unrealistic demands. In response, I unintentionally laughed. Then he yelled at me, "What are you laughing at? Stop belittling me. I've always been annoyed by your attitude. I never thought you'd be so cunning to have such a fortune as a wife. A wife's assets belong to her husband. You have to give me this $10 million. I never intended to keep this secret forever." I was planning to tell you, but you divorced me first, I said. He stopped making excuses, but became more enraged with each word I spoke, blaming and berating me. His shouting was too much for my head, still recovering from illness, and I couldn't bear it. Realizing it was futile to continue talking with Ben, who wouldn't accept my words and would surely try to make me the villain, I quickly ended it. Enough is enough. You divorced me of your own accord, right? Who filed the divorce papers without my consent? I always thought your behavior was terrible, but I never imagined you could be so cruel to think a person could feel this much frustration. Now my heart was filled not with the pain of battling cancer, but with resentment towards Ben. He should have realized that shouting this loudly would affect my weakened body even more. I couldn't suppress my anger towards this selfish person who sat arrogantly beside my bed, accusing me with words worn from his self-centered thoughts. Do you know what I thought when I found out I had cancer? I said. I thought that answering him might make Ben worry about me a little, be kinder to me, and reconsider his feelings. Instead, he didn't even come to visit me in the hospital. When he finally showed up, he told me he had filed for divorce without my consent and that he would take the house. How could he be so selfish? And then come here criticizing me for having substantial assets. I continued. I said it many times, I never intended to keep it a secret forever. I was planning to find the right time to tell you. You destroyed that chance with your own hands. I had never blamed Ben this much before. I had always forgiven his selfish behavior, thinking we were a couple who should support each other. I never scolded or reprimanded him, always enduring for his sake. But the reason I could endure and keep going was that I loved Ben. I truly loved him. But now I don't have any love left for him. All I feel is uncontrollable anger and disbelief towards Ben, who only speaks selfishly. How can someone be so self-centered? What kind of upbringing leads to such a lack of empathy? After all, a person who indulges in an affair and divorces without consent can't possibly have serious thoughts. I was too stunned to speak, realizing it was futile to harbor any doubts. Please, my girlfriend found out you have $10 million and says she'll divorce me if I don't get it from you. If I don't get this money, I'll be all alone. You still love me, right? Don't you want to help the person you love? So Ben's mistress also knows about my $10 million fortune. He must have carelessly told her. From Ben's story, it seems his mistress is also quite obsessed with money. Birds of a feather flock together, I guess. As much as Ben and his mistress seem to be a match, I couldn't care less about him. No matter how much suffering comes his way, it has nothing to do with me anymore. Please, I'll do anything. Just give me the $10 million. Otherwise, I'll suffer. Please help me. I had never seen Ben so desperate. His expression seemed so ridiculous that I couldn't help but laugh. At the same time, I felt disappointed and miserable, realizing he had never been this desperate about anything related to me. The more we talked, the colder my feelings for Ben became. I realized that talking to him anymore was pointless. No more dealing with this rotten man could possibly lead to my happiness. I felt foolish for suffering and hoping during my illness that he might come and speak kindly to me one day, oblivious to my feelings. Ben continued to plead, "Please, I'm begging you, help me." But I couldn't bear to hear his words any longer. "Please leave now," I said. He started to plead with a look of desperation, but even that was noisy and unpleasant to me. I pressed the nurse call button, explained the situation, and asked the nurse to get rid of Ben. A security guard came and forcibly removed him from the room. "Please listen to me. I need you," he shouted until the moment he was thrown out, but I no longer accepted any of his words. Afterwards, he visited the hospital many times, but the nurses, knowing the situation, never let him near my room again. According to a friend, Ben, unable to get the $10 million, disappointed his mistress and was promptly divorced. Now he is left alone. As for me, I continued to confront my cancer with determination and finally recovered, being discharged. The relief of overcoming my difficult battle with cancer and the newfound energy I felt were more precious than anything. Now I'm living a peaceful and relaxed life, gradually using the assets I grew through investments.